you don't really know what's going to happen.
We want to make sure that everyone can be chasing that American dream.
Sometimes the only way to succeed is just to not give up. Now they know
The other side.
All right, today we have a very, very, very special guest.
Yes, we do.
We do. I mean, it's like beyond special. It's special guest. We're not talking about IQ. We're talking about role. Today we have in the house Pastor Danny Clinton.
Wow. This is I see where we're headed.
You're not used to a budget like this.
No.
This is a whole different thing. This is like, I mean, man, if you want to be funny,
That's where the jokes don't land.
So Danny, tell us how you feel about tithing.
Yeah.
Would you like to recap your sermon from this weekend? Your favorite
I would
one?
not.
Oh no! So I've been in Dave's church for almost 3 years now. January will be 3 years, and I've connected with you a lot more in this last year. We've been meeting pretty regularly. He's trying to fix me up. You know what I mean? He's trying to make sure that I'm a good God-fearing man.
I've been trying for 5 years, so good job on you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, between the two of us, I think we're doing okay. Our boy's doing all right.
I mean, there's still some rough edges here and there.
I'm excited because I feel like you know things I don't know, and I probably know things you don't know.
Yeah.
You didn't know I was a true life partner. No, I didn't, which is cool. I'm excited about that. Thank you very much. 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And who's so comfortable?
Not me. It's all lies. I don't get really that nervous about lies.
Fair.
Which one? Oh, all right. You got it. All right. Yeah, and so I've been into church for a few years now. We've connected a little bit more, and dare I say, I would consider you a friend. Even though we do nothing outside of the context of the church channel, absolutely zero. Sure. That time will come.
Sure.
But I found your church to be wildly refreshing, coming from a kid who grew up in church. Very, very different. And so I'm very fascinated to talk to you today about the other side of that story. You know, the podcast here is like, the point of the other side is to get past all the Instagram, to get past all of like the pleasantries and what we present people, but really get into like the details of like, okay, how does this thing actually come to be? So beyond just what was the decisions you made, it's more like, well, how did you make that decision? What came up? And you guys have made a lot of decisions as a church leadership team that have produced some pretty outstanding and abnormal results. And so I'm really looking forward to talking to you today, man. Welcome to the other side.
Thank you both for having me. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm excited to see the other side of the church because, again, for me, I've never really been the biggest fan of church. And also, again, what most people would assume is the perception of Pastor Danny is, you know, I would assume from my perspective, it's like a pastor is like more holier than thou. It's like you make all the decisions. No one really wants to open up to someone who's perfect. So really connecting with people is really strong. So I'm excited to get to know that side of you as well.
Yeah.
So thanks for coming on.
Well, we all know Danny's going to hell because he has tattoos. So
Yeah, he walked in, I was like, whew.
yeah,
It's
could possibly be a clergyman.
Yeah, that from the beginning, I think I got my first tattoo when I was 18 or 19, a little before they were as cool as they are now. Was it barbed wire? No, it was a Flash Panther. You know, off the wall. I walked in and I was like, I'll take that gumball sticker. Matter of fact, I was at a birthday party and a little girl walked up with a sticker tattoo of my Panther and said, look, I have a Pastor Danny tattoo. That was sort of embarrassing, but yeah, the culture of our church from the beginning is 15 years old, and from the beginning, we just wanted to be true to the place we felt like God was calling us. We weren't setting out to be different than all the other churches. We weren't setting out to be the anti-church. We were really just wanting to be true to who we were, and it sort of took off, and then God brought like strange normal people. He didn't bring like a lot of church people, which then meant we had to actually like be the church, not just talk about doing church services, and it just changed everything. And suddenly it's a place where people from all kinds of walks of life, people from all kinds of backgrounds, people who are hurt in all kinds of ways, people who are like Jesus is their best friend, and people who are, as we say, are spiritually curious, like I don't know, man. I'm just here because a friend of mine goes here and she's cool. So I thought I would check it out. And so it's really an interesting crowd. Because I preached at quite a few churches, and ours, as we bring in guest speakers, people are like, "Oh, this is not what I thought it was." Because I think from the Northwest, the big thing about the Northwest is we have that, I guess maybe a cheesy way to say it is we have that trailblazer DNA, meaning everybody hit the Mississippi and stopped, and then they hit the Rockies and stopped, and our forefathers and foremothers, they came all the way to the ocean. And I think that mentality of like, you got to prove it because I'm going to survive it, and I don't need you selling me anything. I think here, there's a lot of places from the Midwest that have tried to plant here. And I know of a place recently where a guy came and he was like, I got to go home. This is you guys are weird. Yeah. Hey, buddy, good luck. I think he was gone in 6 months.
Oh my gosh.
So you adapted to the culture that was here. You didn't try to force the culture that was from anywhere else.
Yeah, I think without meaning to, I love to think I was that clever. I'm from here, so I was born here, right down the road. I moved away, lived overseas for a little while, but pretty much Washington, Oregon are the two places I've lived my whole life. And so I think that I speak, I speak that sort of rough, organic kind of language that people in the Northwest want to hear. And a lot of it is just sort of invulnerability, if I'm honest. I've been married almost 26 years. I have 3 kids. My marriage has been pretty messy because most of it was in ministry.
Yeah.
And it's really hard because people put me in a fishbowl because I have that title. And then, I'll preach a message and I'll get a bunch of applause, and then I'll go home and be a jerk husband. And my wife will be like, "You're not the person you are on stage." And I'm like, "Yeah, but I don't, this is me being vulnerable." For a while in my 20s, I was like, "But what you say doesn't matter versus the 1,000 people that are applauding." And so my value was in the wrong place. And so that has since shifted with a lot of work and a lot of therapy and a lot of prayer and a whole lot of Jesus. But I think that what I'm trying to say is the tone of the church is that we talk about that. I've told that story from the pulpit.
Yeah. You told several stories
I have
about your incapabilities as a husband.
Yeah. They filter my messages through our elders and our staff, and it takes sometimes some conversation. They're like, I don't think you're supposed to. Like, I asked a question this last weekend, like, how vulnerable can a pastoral image on stage be before the people listening to him lose respect?
That's the fine line I was saying.
Yeah. But then how pious can a spiritual figure be before people think, well, I can never measure up to the show he's putting on, so why try?
But I think that's where the trust is built. So for me, if you're owning up and you're saying how, how many times you've messed up, or, I'm not this, I'm not that, but as long as I see you trying to make it right and be better, then I respect you a lot more than, it's the same thing as I'm going through now as being a dad, the 7-year-old, I got to let him know when I fuck up, just say, okay, I'm working on it. But if I just continue to fuck up and never work on it, then that's where respect's lost.
Yeah. And I think it's because I work with a lot of, especially young faith leaders, people who are trying to kind of get in to this movement in their life. Yeah. And I'll tell them over and over, because it was told to me, it's not the what we would call sin or failure that gets people removed from the movement. It's the secrets. It's the not being honest about the fact that you're dealing with stuff. And then you sell people a bunch of stuff that they buy, and then suddenly out of nowhere you're exposed as a fraud. And they're like, well, if he's keeping secrets about that, or she's keeping secrets about that, they must be keeping secrets about everything, and people are out. So now, you also don't want to just paint the world with your emotional trauma, because that's not always good either. Yeah. Who wants to come and listen to that? But I think you want to be on a journey with people. And I think when we started the church, that was our hope, is we would go on that journey with people, and right now a lot of people have joined us, which has been really cool, including this dude.
Yeah.
And he's a hard guy to capture.
Yeah.
Physically and emotionally.
Try spiritually.
They're just trying to reel me in for months. I'm getting closer.
Yeah.
I mean, I have my own journey with church. I mean, I grew up in church. I was involved in church. For goodness sakes, I have a bachelor's degree in theology and was a full-time pastor for the better part of a decade. And then I went through a tremendous humbling experience where, that sort of thing happened. I did have secrets, and secrets came out, and it really hurt people and hurt my family and hurt really every aspect of my life. And so to find a place where I was willing to go, and not just go like for my children, but to go and be involved was a real big challenge. And to be fair, Danny will tell you this is the truth. I literally sat in the back row for 2 years. Nobody even knew my name. Like a couple people might have, like, I think we met earlier on, so I was like, hey, I just want to know where I came from, what's going on. And then I think that was the last conversation we had for several months before I was like, hey, I think like you'd given a message about, participating and serving probably a year ago, probably. I was like, oh God, here I go. Let's start talking about it.
Man, God opened his doors for you. And you walked through.
I don't know, man. Sometimes I just feel like I'm being shoved. More shoved than walking through, like fighting and screaming sometimes. But you feel like that as a pastor sometimes too. I remember we've had conversations like, dude, listen, like, I'd rather not do this. So how do you have that feeling of like, I'd rather not do this, but yet here you are, Pastor Danny, all happy. Like, walk us through how you walk in that tension.
Yeah, I think I accepted along. I didn't want to be a vocational pastor up until about, I would say, maybe 12 years ago. And I've done it for
2 years after you were the lead pastor of a church.
Yeah. And I was the youth pastor and then executive pastor of a church prior to that for 10 years. This will sound weird, but I was just good at it. I had a different job. I was in kind of the construction industry and doing my thing. And I grew up in church. So like you, I knew church. I was, born in a pew, as they say. So I loved it and it was fulfilling to me. And I was also a sick kid. I had cancer. I'm a Dornbecker kid. So I had cancer as a kid and a lot of medical stuff. So I was 13 or 14 and the church was really warm for me as a kid. And so I felt like a really safe place. And then the guy that was pastoring our church was like, hey, I think you should help out in youth. And I was like, nah, I'm good. And then he said, you should help out in youth. And so I, after some shoving, some coercion. I started helping out and I was like, oh, this is very natural for me. This feels really organic for me. And so a few years later, he offered me a job and I was like, I'll try it for a year. And, but what I didn't like was exactly what you're saying. I didn't like some of the hypocrisy that I felt with kind of talking down to people, especially from the pulpit or a place of teaching, kind of like, well, they're saying you should change your life. Here's what you should do better. And a lot of steps, a lot of you,
God blessing.
But then you knew that person, wasn't actually walking out any of those steps. And
right.
And so I wrestled with that because I didn't want to get on stage and tell people like, I don't know what I'm doing all the time. And I'm kind of guessing. And sometimes I'm doing stuff begrudgingly and sometimes I'm complaining. I'm a big complainer to God. He knows that.
He's aware.
Yeah. I complained about this podcast before I got here. I was like,
what did you say? I want to know.
I said, I don't know who's going to hear this and I don't know where it's going to go. And it's not really the audience I speak to, but once again, it felt organic when you ask. And that's how our church has been operating, is we just kind of walk through those doors. And so 12 years in, there was just a sense of like, I felt like God was like, hey, I'm putting you in this place for a season and for a reason and for people that you get to meet. And I accepted it. And then that's when kind of everything changed. So what about your story with church? Because I know a little bit about his. So
yeah, so for me, I've never been really a big church person. We were kind of those, like, we went to church when it was appropriate, like Easter. Mm-hmm. Like the
Christmas.
Sure, yeah. No,
Christmas and Easter.
We showed up at the local church right down the road. I grew up in Vancouver, BC, when I was going to churches there.
Okay.
But my family's never really been in church or faith-based at all. Like, we all believe, but we don't practice at all. So I didn't really have any structure that way. And then I started going to church when I was 18, and I had my first son, and I was in a lost space because I placed him up for adoption at 18.
Okay.
And my ex and I at the time were in a very toxic relationship, very abusive relationship, which I wasn't aware of because I thought abuse was you hit somebody.
Sure.
So I was like, I'm not abusing anyone, and she's not abusing me.
Sure.
But we were just mentally abusing the shit out of each other.
Mm-hmm.
So I really wanted to kind of get away from that. I knew I needed help. Couldn't turn to my parents because my parents are very judgmental, and it was one of those things like I didn't want to disappoint them anymore. So I was like, okay, where do I go? So I ran into Young Life. Mm-hmm. And people were like, oh, high school is the cool thing to do. But like, people go to Young Life and have their hangouts and stuff like that. So I thought it was cool. And then that's actually our friend Nate White.
Oh, yeah.
Too. So he was a part of that. So I went there and it seemed, I didn't know what to expect, but it was just open arms. You know, they had like activities to do all the time. No one's drinking, no one's partying, no one's doing drugs. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And met some cool people. But then at the end of every sermon, I guess it was, or whatever it is, they always like, that was where you felt really uncomfortable. Because it's like, okay, who's ready to give your hand to God? Who's ready to say no more? And you're this new birth of yourself. And I was like, fuck that. I have like 5 days lined up. Can I wait?
The next meeting.
Yeah. We gotta
check my schedule.
We got a beer pong championship game going on in like a month from now.
Yeah.
Like, I gotta be in that. I'm supposed to not drink.
Sure.
so I just didn't want to, but that was trying to make a light of it. But again, I just wanted to like commit all in, right? I wanted to know more about it and understand it. But I did love the fact that the guy I was listening to, I did like how pastors can relay everything to them, or to like the public, right? Like, and I swear, and Nathan, when you were performing at church a few weeks ago, and I showed up, and I'm like, I wasn't going to, but then I did, and then I swear the pastor, whatever that passage was, spoke directly to me, and I was like, this happens every time. I'll randomly walk into church, and then it's going to be the most random day of all time, but that message that is being spoken always speaks to me. And that's what I love about it. What I hate about it is, okay, now that we got you, now, you know, we're going to feed you the rest of it.
Yeah.
And I don't like being told what to do.
Yeah.
I hate authority. I hate, being told what to do in general. So I've always had a dislike of the church for that reason. Also, the history of church, just fall this way, or the Crusaders go out there, and you don't listen to them, you're dead. I was like, I never was a big fan of like how they push their message everywhere, right? Just in general, through history, through everything, it's like, this is the only way, and I hate that. There's multiple ways.
Right.
I mean, I believe in mermaids, for fuck's sake. Like,
That's the true thing. He's like, no, mermaids are real. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, outer space is the ocean.
Okay.
Right? Like, I believe in, like, the extraterrestrials, all this. I believe in, not only believe it, I just have an open mind to it all. Yeah. And I don't like when people have closed minds, and I've always viewed the church as a whole as closed-minded people. Yeah. So, but I love the idea of faith and believing in a higher power. So I have a giant cross on my back. Like, it's like, I believe in a higher power, and I do believe in Jesus, and I believe in God and stuff, but I don't believe in, I guess, Christianity. So that was my background. I just don't need told what to. Okay. So if you tell me to do something, it does. If you tell me to do something, I'll do it 10 times slower, I'll do it 10 times better, depending on the mood you want me to be in.
Good. How's that work in your guys' partnership?
Go ahead. I think it works well, because if he gives me a goal, I crush it. Okay. Right? And if he calls me on it, I like the fact that if he says, okay, we're going to need to do, I guess it depends on the tone. Now think about it. Damn it. You are going to do your job. Well done. Switch the roles. So if he tells me like, hey, we need to sell out this event, I will be like, don't worry, I got it. He'll stress out, obviously, like, well, there's like 2 days till the event, and I still get it done, right? But it's not 80% of the time, 100% of the time. But then there's other times where somebody tells me like, can you hurry up? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to hurry up anymore. You're still going to hurry up. So I'm going to take way longer. So it really depends on the context, I guess. But
I think the difference is Mike and I have the same goals.
Yeah.
So it's like we're both trying to accomplish the same thing. So if I see something that needs to be adjusted, or he sees something that needs to be adjusted, we have a way of communicating with each other when we're like, this is important. I really feel strongly about this. Because there's not a lot of stuff that we feel really strongly about. Most of it's like, I don't know, let's just figure it out. Like, let's just try it, get the data, and then make a decision. Like, we don't look at a lot of like decisions through like a right and wrong lens necessarily. We look at it like, well, let's just do it and get some data. Like, we do an event 3 years at one time. We've got an event coming up in December. For the last 3 years, it's been at the same time in the morning. And just we're like, well, let's just do it in the afternoon. Like, let's just see what happens, so like, we don't really have like strong opinions. Like, for us, it's a lot like, let's just figure out what's going on. So that said, though, when we do have a strong opinion, it comes from a different perspective. Mike has a way of talking to me that I know in his tone, because we're basically married. I know in his tone, I'm like, oh shit, this is something I really need to pay attention to. Like, he doesn't have to say, I have a real strong feeling to like, manipulate me. It's more like the way he communicates with me. I know that this is important, and we trust each other in that in almost every time. Yeah. Doesn't even have debate. Yeah. Or conversation. Like, in our old office, we used to walk around the block a lot. That's how our staff do. Like, okay, there it is. And there's like 2 hours. We're like doing circles. We're like going at it. Like, really, like, I wouldn't say arguing. It's just like, we just really want to figure it out. So, I don't know, we kind of just work things through.
Yeah. So where I'm coming from, I would, I guess, be curious about what it would be like for you to ponder that the biggest thing that I think most people have a problem with when it comes to church is the word, we'll steal it and run with it, is tone. The other thing that people don't realize is you and God have the same goals. Like God wants you to be happy. He wants you to be life fulfilled. He wants you to be successful. He wants you to be the best version of Mike that you can be, the same as you want for your children.
Yeah.
And I think what we do instead is we become children who see God as a dysfunctional God because of the older brother and sister that stand on stage and sing and lead and preach and give really bad versions of actually what Dad intended for your life and my life and your life. And so God wants debate. There's tons. I mean, the Bible is it's many things, but one of the things that I think people miss is that it is a constant illustration of people who are doing just what you said, doing parking lot walks with God. like really, like, why are you doing this? And why is it like this? And the tone is that God's like, hey man, I want for you the best that you can have. And I think the church teaches the opposite of that, which is that you're an inconvenience, your sin is a problem, here's the hoops you have to jump through. But there's a principle in psychology that children, especially young children, determine from their parents how much love they are receiving based on the level they can inconvenience them. So can I call you from school and have you pick me up? Can I come to you in the middle of the night when I have a bad dream? Or are you like, get out of my room, I'm sleeping? And Dad, like if your tone, then you can actually talk with kids about, hey, how do your parents love you? And the level of love goes down based on parents who are just constantly inconvenienced.
Yeah.
And the church has done a really, really good job of telling people, unless you measure up to here, you're an inconvenience to God.
Yeah.
And the Bible is full of just the opposite.
See, I think like 80% of the churches I've been to are actually pretty good at the message. Right? They do have good pastors. I've been to a couple churches where I'm like, okay, I like the message. And then I always want to leave the last 20 minutes. And the same thing when we went to a business mastermind class, Life Surge. Where they had like Ed Milet and like the guy Robert, the guy from Shark Tank and stuff all there. So we wanted to go hear there. But their whole message was like they would do a good job speaking for the first 20 minutes or so, and then the last half was just straight. Okay, now let's all give each other, high fives and praise ourselves to Jesus, and like give me the comfort. And like, who's here?
I'm dumb, but Jesus helped me, so you can be rich too.
Yeah, and that's the part I fucking can't stand. But
that shit drives me insane.
80% of most churches I've been to, that they are very welcoming. They're very like, I like the message. They do a great job, and I can tell you're a great speaker in this too. Like you guys do a great job of making people relate to you and the message. But then it's that last part of like, okay, you ready? And I'm like, no, I will never.
Well, that's when a lot of churches are trying to get you to join their movement instead of grow deeper in relationship with God.
Yeah,
because that's the only goal, is that God and you meet each other so you can share, so you can have conversations, so you can all of this stuff is encompassed in getting to know who He is while also Him, because He already knows who you is, right? Who you are, who I am, who you is. Yeah,
I'm a professional.
Yeah. This is what I do for a living. He knows, but it's really us that are on the journey of discovery to become the person God's calling us to be, which is the best version of us. It's a lot like when you look at your kids, especially the ones that are a lot like you. You're like, oh, I know exactly what you're going to be like in high school. Let me help you avoid some stuff. Because you know who they are.
Yeah.
And
it's a mirror.
It is. And we are images of God in creation. And so my whole journey is just to help people realize that God is in your story. He wants to be part of your story. And that whether you know it or not, your story is working you. So yeah, your story, my story. I mean, even my cancer journey, right? I shared earlier that I had cancer as a kid. Well, when you wake up from your treatment and you end up with radiation, they tattoo you. So I woke up at 2, 3, 4 with little dots of tattoos. And so I didn't know that I knew what they were because everybody told me like, oh, trying to make it cool because it was scary. But as then I became a teenager, I had this deep desire to go get ink all over my body. And in reality, my story was working me that now I'm going to be the one who determines where the ink goes on my body. I'm going to take back control, right? I'm going to take back the control that I lost as a child. And so suddenly I didn't realize that until 5 years. And now I'm like, oh, but everybody's story is working them, and there's nobody better than God to come in and reveal parts of your story that are like, hey, I'm in this. I'm in this. I'm with you.
But now you look like you know where the best breweries are in Vancouver.
Yeah.
So that's super cool, man.
Let me ask you a question. So this is a perspective that has developed over time, it sounds like. Because it seems to me, based on your history and background, you probably didn't always feel this way.
No.
So what changed?
A lot of suffering and being willing to continue to walk through pain. We believe, right, as a church person, we believe that there is a force that works against the church, right? A lot of people don't believe in evil. I do believe in evil. I also believe in good. And I think that the whole game of evil is that when you are not accomplishing your goals, it says you're not good enough, you're not valuable, you're not important, you're not smart, you're not going to make it. But then once you switch and actually start accomplishing your goal, evil switches tactics and says you're the best. Nobody's like you.
Wow.
You're the only one. Like you are the center of the universe. So you have to decide if you're going to, at least I did, if I was going to survive this thing, because church eats people alive. That's just what it does. Especially guys like me. I don't know if you guys do any Enneagram stuff at all.
Instagram.
Yeah. You should look into Enneagram. You should have your subscribers. You have so many.
It's basically stargazing for Christians.
Okay.
Imagine your horoscope, but for Christians. That's the
Okay, so
it's a Taurus. Mike's like, I'm sorry I'm late on the Taurus. It's like, hey, sorry I'm an asshole, I'm an 8.
Yes.
It's the same conversation, just ones like church and ones in the
It's the same ideas.
Yeah.
But the concept
not
is
invalidate everything you're going to say over the next 3 minutes.
No. The concept is that there's some people who are built to be up front because it doesn't feed them, and then there's other people who it's like it's an ego trip. And for guys like me, so I would be an Enneagram 8. We generally don't last very long because we're conflict oriented and we are intuitive based, and so we could just make decisions and push through people. And I did that for many years, and the church did not do well until I started putting people in my life who could say no with power, which I think is a business principle as well. If you don't have people in your life that you've given permission to say no with power, like, hey, you know me, you know where I struggle. Let's say you drink too much, right? So I don't know your guys'. I'm not prophesying.
yeah, thank you for not looking at me.
Yeah,
You said that.
let's say you drink too much. But let's say you do, right? And so you go to your friend and you're like, hey man, I drink a lot on Friday, and I give you permission to speak your perspective into my life. Unless he has the ability to actually go, hey man, it's Friday and I'm going to call you at 8, or hey, you didn't answer your phone last night, you messed up again. Then you don't really have an intimacy and a connection you think you do, because there's no betterment happening. And I put people in my life that called out my garbage, and I hated every second of it.
Okay, let's talk about the other side of this.
Okay.
What were some of the things that people corrected in you that you were like, fuck, that one hurt?
This is still the other side. It's not even past the other side. That I struggle to have empathy for people who are walking through things that I deem are not as either complex or difficult as I think they are. So
It's so simple.
yeah, or they're hurting in a way that I feel like, well, that's like life. Like, yeah, you're gonna hurt. Yeah, you're gonna get critiqued.
Here's the thing: how do you lead an organization of your size without having at least a little bit of that?
You gotta have some, but without being able to be critiqued, without being able to be called out for those sorts of things, you end up in an echo chamber of all the people who just love how you're made and love how you are.
Yeah,
and it's worse.
Yeah,
it's worse.
Yeah.
And so I have put people around me who can say no with power. And I'm in a regular emotional fist fight with them constantly, because they're constantly like, hey, what's going on inside? And I'm like, nothing's going on inside. And they're like, I sat in that meeting, felt like some stuff was going on inside.
I'm like, yeah, we've had a few of those conversations ourselves.
Yeah.
We get to know people at a certain level. I mean, me and Mike have spent an abnormal amount of time together. Like for 2 people, like we've built this business over the last 5 years. Yeah, totally. But it's like same thing. Like when you're building a church, you spend a tremendous amount of time with people and a lot of discussions and a lot of conversations and things like that. And they get to know, oh, your eyebrows look a little weird on that one. Like they pick up on the little things that nobody else is going to think of.
That's why you want to handpick your people.
Yeah.
that you give that authority to.
So practically, what does that conversation look like?
I'm a firm believer that you should have your mentors categorized, that you shouldn't have one person that speaks in every area of your life, because, I got a guy who has more money than, anyone that I know. And he would be the first person to tell you that he's not in great physical shape, so he wouldn't speak of fitness in my life. But a lot of people who love to mentor, love to like, I'm your mentor, I'm your guy now, I'm your gal. So I'm going to speak into your finances, your physical health, your marriage. But what if I don't want your marriage? What if I see your marriage and I'm like, yeah, no thanks, man, you're great at fitness. Let's say I find a fitness guy. Your marriage seems a little. So I kind of have built a mentor, as I imagine it, as sort of an arm of one person and a leg of another and a heart of another, and that's who speaks into my world, and I keep them in their lane. So that is one thing that has really benefited me, is I don't let mentors, what's the right word, kind of veer or meander into other areas, because mentoring is addictive, right? When you start helping people as a helper, it's good stuff. Like, you want to lean into that, but it is not helpful. And that has also helped me with people that I mentor, because I can say quickly, like, hey, that's not my lane. Like, I don't speak into that. And the best mentors know that. They're like, hey, I'm your finance guy, I'm your fitness gal, I'm your spiritual person. I've got some solid spiritual people. I wouldn't ask them questions about finances and investments to save, but nobody knows theology better than them. But they're totally different than the people who speak into my marriage, which maybe don't even barely know God, but something about their marriage is epic. And I go, how do you want that? Yeah. And then I mentor in return and try to preach in return, where I try to stay in my lane. And if I hear outside my lane, and hopefully you hear me do this, I'll qualify. Like, hey, this is a book I'm reading, really impacted my life. Like, we just went through Henry Nouwen's Life of the Blood. Really powerful book. Yeah. Way beyond anything I could ever own is mine. And the way I got away with it is by telling people, this is his stuff. It impacted me. It blessed me, to use a churchy word. And so I'm going to teach it. But no one thought I was like, I think he went to Yale and Harvard and theologian. Yeah. Psychology.
So you don't have to worry about people thinking that.
Yeah.
My kids think that you're a comedian, by the way.
Oh, well,
yeah, that's what they think.
Well, it's all from God, so.
My middle one came up for real, my middle one came up to once. I was like, he's like, you're really funny. You should be a comedian. that was what he took from the sermon. And then the other day, you'll love this one, Mike.
Yeah.
Pastor Danny started a new series called Fade to Black, and it's about this idea of like dying to self and letting God shine through. And so I asked my kids, I said, hey guys, what did you learn from church today? They said, you have to kill yourself.
To be reborn.
Yeah. Come on, finish the chorus.
So I sent them a voice memo of us in the car. I was like, hey boys, what did you learn from church today? And they all yelled out, kill yourself! And like, that's the kind of dark humor that we get. I'm guessing as a cancer survivor, dark humor's right up your alley.
Yeah, this is true.
It just seems how people go.
This is true.
Yeah.
I love that.
What do you got there?
To sum up what you're saying about finding mentors in different areas, right? Like, I think that was maybe going back to like what my problem was. Like, it's like, okay, we're the answer for everything.
Yes.
And that was the one thing I didn't like. I honestly, like, to sum that, to kind of tie the bow on that part, I think maybe if they just asked that in private afterwards, like, okay, that ends everything you'd like to say and like convert to that. Yeah. You're more than welcome to come up. But when they put you on blast in front of everyone to raise your hand, it's just, that's what I'm like, dude, don't put me on fucking blast like that. But that being said, the fact that you said you find mentors in every area, this is a quote I just posted on September 26th. Check my work. It says,
Receive.
Yeah. You shouldn't worry about criticism from someone you never asked advice from.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that one is what you're speaking to. Like, I'm looking for people who are living the life in this area that I want to live and I want to learn from them.
Yeah. And in return, you shouldn't critique people that you are struggling with what it is they're struggling with.
Correct.
But that's the funnest, man, because you get to judge everybody based on your intentions, and you get to judge everybody by their actions.
Without, so
it's a very convenient. Well, I meant to keep my finances good. Like, my intentions are good.
Yeah.
That's how we do. Well, you gave an analogy the other day. It was so funny about how sometimes somebody will cut you off and when you get all upset about it. But when you accidentally cut somebody off, you're like, no, I have all my reasons.
Yeah, you spill coffee and you're like, they're honking and you're like, man, why does this person know like the day I had or the coffee I just spilled or the bee that came in?
But then when they do it to you.
But then when somebody cuts you off, you're never like, maybe there's a bee in their mouth. You're like, oh, yeah. You're like, this guy intentionally saw me break check me. And
So we're judging ourselves by intention.
Yes.
And everybody else by action. It's a very convenient situation.
Yes. And that's why I think the judgment, it should be saved for, hey, I really respect, as I said, the way you parent your kids.
Right.
Can I ask questions about that journey? And if they're honest, they'll share about the stuff they messed up and the things they wish they would have done better. And suddenly you like, okay, this person's relatable, and then I keep them in that lane. But if they suddenly start giving me, mortgage refinance advice, I'm gonna be
Have you ever heard of a reverse mortgage?
Yeah. Yeah. That's why my kids obey. I'm like, what?
That's why my kids
churches and I honor that you said churches are constantly trying to get people to buy the product of the brand that they're selling instead of this relationship with God that is supposed to move you. That's what you're feeling when you feel connected.
Correct.
And that's what my hope is. That's what the church that we're a part of is.
That's a good. I like how you said that, because that's what we all do. It's a sales. Everything's sales,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's what we do in our business.
People sell Jesus all the time.
Yeah, and for our business, it's like I sell them on the value, and then I'm in our pitch. You say I hope the whole point of this class I'm doing is the value is going to be so tremendous at the end of this class. When it's time to hire a bookkeeper or it's time to be able to hire a tax filer, you don't want to go anywhere else because the value I brought in the last hour. Not as opposed to, all right, well, that was my class. Hope you all had a lot of value out of that. Now, who wants to buy? Raise your hand. Who wants to buy? You want a book? You want a book? You want that? Sign here. It doesn't, I want them to organically, I did provide so much value to you. You're going to want to reach out to me afterwards. And that's why we have lines up afterwards. People want me to talk and say, hey, I had a question about this or I want to know more about this, because I didn't push the sale. I just went and crushed it, as always.
Humble brag.
Right? That's it. So it is all relatable. Business, church, religion. I mean, in the sense of everyone's selling something at some point. It's just at the end result, how you kind of get that, how you
it's all humans connecting.
Yeah.
Right. We're trying to connect with each other. We're trying to connect with who we are. We're trying to connect with our story, with our future selves. And I believe we're trying to connect with our Creator. And I think that when you look at my child in the eye as she sits across from me, she's more than science just sitting in a chair. She just didn't happen. And I believe as her father that I want the best for her. And some of that's going to be just, to illustrate following her in her car of life wherever she goes. And I'm going to see an obstacle. And I might want to pop her tire, but then she's going to blame me for that experience. Well, that boy would have worked out, but you popped my tire, you got in the way, you confronted him. Or I might want to run her off the road because I think she's making some behaviors. Again, she's going to blame me. My job is to do what God does with us and just stay with her, follow her where she goes. And as she gets into accidents, I'm the first one out. I'm the first one there. I'm the first one to be like, I'll see her. I got you. I've never left you. And that is the worst.
And that builds the trust too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, go back the other side of our business relationship. Nathan and I have had many times like that where I think I've legitimately told Nathan, I thank you for your advice. I'm going to walk through this burning house. Yeah. I know we both see it burning. And as a relationship advice, you remember that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
All I need you to do is have that fire extinguisher to the other side.
Yes.
I'm not gonna complain. I'm not gonna ask you. I know we both see that burning house. I'm gonna go through it. And he's
like, I just have to. I was like, okay.
And he did.
I'll be there for you on the other side. No big deal.
Yeah.
You're an idiot.
Go ahead. That's kind of the Bible. And honestly, the Bible is sort of just a lot of stories of God walking with people through burning houses. And I think it's supposed to illustrate to us that that's what he wants to do with us. Because even if your house isn't on fire, I guarantee pastor, spiritual leader, whatever you want to coin, maybe my house isn't on fire, but my kitchen sure is. I have a room and I've never not had somewhere in my life that's on fire. I have one right now that I'm literally processing out loud with my therapist, my wife. And I'm like, oh, there's more flame here than I thought there was. But the difference is it stays in my kitchen. As you said, I've got God with that fire extinguisher. I've got friends. I've got tools. And as soon as I put it out, I'm not surprised when something else creeps up and suddenly I've got to
dumpster in my backyard on fire.
You got like a 5-second window every time with no fires. I
Yeah.
realize I'm like, everything's good.
And I don't even think you have no fires. You just haven't found them or smelled them, or they're just not big enough yet. Because I think we're constantly putting out the fires of choices that were made for us that we didn't make, our parents, our story, our culture, and then we're putting out fires that we have put in other people's lives, and then we're putting out a lot of fires we started in our own lives.
Yeah.
And I think if our kids could hear that, if our churches could preach that, people would be less afraid to come and say, look at where I was burned. Because that's the whole point, is that everybody's trying to cover up coming to church.
Yeah,
Like,
versus
they don't
here's
know
a
how
shirt
smoke.
that covers
It's
up
just-
all your burns.
It's not
Yeah.
real. It's not real.
Do you have, how many kids do you have? 3. How old are they?
29, 25, and 20.
Is there a rebel in the family who's going against everything that you're trying to teach them?
My 2 older kids were pretty hurt by the church, as I told you, that I was sort of, that I didn't manage well, the success, I guess.
Yeah.
And I would say they still believe in God. I would say that they are probably where you are with, they've seen that their dad chose the applause of the church over them as children in many areas, not every area, but many areas. And so we're able to have conversations. They can come to, special events. They're not anti-God, but they're not involved in serving. And I know that's because of the choices that I've made, back to the fires that I started. And I believe fully that as life shows up, as experiences are had, they will have this foundation, and they will find how they're supposed to be connected. We don't church service, church attendance. That's not what I'm about. I'm just about God and people getting to know each other, and them realizing He wants better for you than He would you.
Yeah, it's complete trust.
Mm-hmm.
You're just trusting the process, trusting they'll find their way, and you're not going to force them to do anything. And this is just it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have one that's more, do you see yourself more in than the other 3? It's not like one, we have raising one kid, and then you have 3 that you can see. I'm sure, one kid has yourself and one kid more than the other ones.
They're all pretty handsome.
There you go. There you go.
You're really good at the stats. Huh?
Yeah.
Seems more.
They're so Swedish Jew for like no other chances. It's horrible.
Do you see one of them more like you than the other ones?
I see my youngest daughter had a better version of church because of the work that God did in my wife and I. And I think the church has far less pain in her life. And so it's much easier for her.
Yeah. Question: how does your experience watching your children go through the pain of church impact how you pastor?
Oh, a lot. Yeah, a lot.
How so?
Well, I think back to the suffering. I think that the goal. So all principles are transferred only in a relationship. You cannot transfer a principle to anybody. A thought, a way of wanting someone to behave without relationship. The only way to do that is to confine them in prison of some sort and give them this
Sounds lovely.
way of existing.
Sounds really great.
And I think my kids taught me that, because for that decade or so where I didn't have the relationship I wanted with them, a lot of principles that are important to me didn't transfer to them. So suddenly relationship has become really, really valuable in my day-to-day walk. And also it's taught me that some people are going to have an experience of church that isn't going to be set within the walls of a Sunday morning experience, because I have seen my kids mature in their faith. I've seen them develop, and it hasn't. I think they're actually healthier outside of church, asking their questions on their journey in the last 10 years than they were under my roof, kind of going to church.
Okay, we got to get into that. That's such an interesting statement, especially if you're coming from a vocational pastor.
Yeah.
So one of the things I'm very interested in your story is there's just so much transition in the way you think.
Mhm.
So it went from, because we talked about this before, we both had a pretty rigid view of church and Christianity growing up. Obviously, that was the culture that we were raised in, different but similar, right? And now you're at a spot where like, no, I actually value that my kids can learn and develop and have a relationship with God outside of this context. But I'm guessing that you didn't always feel that way.
No, because the church it gives, especially its pastors, but its members too, report cards, and it's A on attendance and A on giving. You got to be on serving because you had a busy job, but hopefully, that raises more money so you can get back to A on giving. And it's a report card that I don't think, I know that God doesn't hold.
Yeah.
He is after our hearts. And
And it has taught me a lot about how he loves me, because the reality is I could preach an amazing sermon and grow a giant church for the rest of my life, and God would still have to complete his good work in me in spite of the good work that I did. And the reality is, if God called me to be a plumber and a successful husband and help people and be honest and do good work over being a pastor, if I chose to disobey him and be a pastor, then my life, I believe, would be a failure. Yeah. Because I wasn't who he called me to be. And there's honor outside of these what people consider high positions. And I think that my children have taught me that. Because they don't hear sermons, they don't hear messages, they just want dad. And I'm like, but I'm really shiny on stage. I say some really good stuff, and I got really vulnerable stuff. Yeah, and they're like, but we just want to go to breakfast and have you ask us like about work, and they're both married, our marriage stuff, and we just want a relationship with you. Yeah, and it reminds me once again, like, oh, like that's what God wants. It's the sports father showing up and determining whether it would be so dysfunctional to determine whether or not you loved your child based on how many points he or she scored in a basketball game, and your whole evening or the whole next week would be related to how many points you scored. And church kind of does that. Yeah, church kind of tells people like, well, you gotta get good at 3-pointers and free throws, and you got to get that jump shot down. And you're like, okay, but I'm not even athletic. I like music. I have lots of natural leverage. Yeah. Natural leverage. Yeah. Church just, it's a system. Man's church is a system that you can get really good at. And the problem is, it doesn't mean you are got it. Yes, the child that God wants you to be, because a real dad would be encouraging. He would recognize, oh, I'm sorry, you didn't score the points you wanted on the court. That's not going to determine conversation and love and investment. And the church has a bad habit of putting people on courts and saying, all right, who's next? Let me look at your form. Let me look at the way you operate, and then that's going to determine whether you belong. And I don't see that at all.
No, it sounds like your ego's checked pretty hard. Like you said, you're there to serve, but serving is not necessarily in a certain way. It's just serving to make sure that people are taken care of. You have trust, and you're there to guide them in however they need to be guided, and just shed light on them.
Yeah, I think I'm there to be. You're talking about my pastor? Or
I'm just talking to you in general. I mean, you seem like a good dude. Like I said, I don't know. I judge when I hear just the word, right? It's like you're a pastor. I'm assuming. Well, I used to think. Sure. I've met a few pastors in my day. Sure. 1, 2. I mentioned pastors. Listen, but you assume somebody's like, well, the perception I get from that. So I'm just starting to realize, like, it's pretty cool. I really admire you.
Oh, just wow. Do you have a? Nope. You can't mock his vulnerability.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can do whatever I want.
Yeah, he's in control of the sound. So
what are you talking about? Yeah. Well, I think all of our jobs is to let people into our humanness. Yeah. And you did that when you shared your story, and he did that. And when you let people into your humanness, then suddenly I think God starts working. Maybe we're not holding hands and praying or studying the Bible, but we're talking about how do we be better dads, better men, better business leaders, more honorable. We want to close deals. Sure, I hope my church develops and matures, but at the end of the day, I don't. And I spend a lot of time with people in passing away. That's a big part of my job. I have rarely met someone with lots of money who passes like someone with lots of love. With someone with lots of money, usually they're pretty fearful because they're barn builders, and they know their barns are going to bring volatility or bring difficulty. But people who just have poured their lives into the people around them, there's a peace that I'm after.
What an amazing distinction.
Yeah, I like that.
What's that? Be rich or loved?
Yeah, money doesn't carry over, right? So it's like, again, I learned that a long time ago. My side note, when I went to anger management when I was younger, like 20s, 21 or whatever.
Everything you've done, you were younger.
Yesterday.
Yeah. You want to see a picture of me when I was younger? Every picture you were younger.
Yesterday. Yeah, I know, but still.
That's when I was younger.
Exactly. So, to give context, when I was in my 20s, like in early 20s, no dating management or whatever. So that was like my turning point because I always felt like, you want to be like the feared kid, or you want to like use intimidation as more of a way of getting power, respect. It's like, don't fucking cross me, or, that's the end of it. So that's how you respect. And then I learned that in anger management, it was like, I was going there. It was actually after I told you my ex and I were in an abusive relationship. It was an emotionally abusive relationship. So I walked in there thinking like, this is bullshit. Why am I in this anger management class? I didn't get her. Like, I don't need to be here. Mm-hmm. So I walked in not trying to learn anything. And then I had an attitude of like, I'm better than everyone else here. Because I see drug dealers, I see abusers, I see people who put their, wife through a wall, like all this stuff. I'm like, why the fuck am I with you guys? Mm-hmm. And then after it was like the third week, I had to go every week for 6 months. And then as a month after, or once a month after that for another 6 months. But it's like after the third week, and so I went in, some guy like was leaving. He what we call graduated, right? He was in there, he served his time, and he gets out. Never remember the guy's name, just remember what he looks like. But he's this older, like biker looking dude, long white beard and stuff. And he said, if you walk past me, he goes, hey, if you continue to have an attitude while you're coming to these things, you're not going to learn anything. You'll be right back. Mm-hmm. So he's like, so think about how you wanted people to view you, because if you pass away today with this attitude, no one's going to show up. That's right. And he left. Yeah, that's right. And I kind of like, it was a lot to process. But I kept thinking about it like throughout the rest of the day. I didn't think it meant that much to me when he said it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to hold easy. Get the fuck out of here. Sure. But then like for the next week, it just for some reason kept replaying in my head. I was like, fuck, dude, why is this bugging the hell out of me? And I was like, all right, fuck it. He's right though. If I'm going to be paying to be here, if I don't want to be here, I might as well listen to it. Mm-hmm. And then that's when like I was like, oh shit. There's different forms of abuse. There's financial abuse, animal abuse, sexual abuse, mental abuse, spiritual, all this stuff. And I was like, fuck. And it changed my entire life from that one guy who I'll never know his name, but it was on Street F or whatever. I know that Main Street and Street F in that little building that I remember going by. That was what changed my entire life, because then I got to understand more of like, just myself and what was going on and different types of, how I want to be viewed in life. So.
Well, and that speaks to the beauty of community, right? Because I probably wouldn't have known what to say to you, even though I'm a pastor, but somebody who saw themselves and you saw the journey you were on, that they paid some costs, and now maybe they paid way longer than you, trying to take a minute to not humble you, but to truly help you how you're meant to be helped. And that's the beauty of community. And church in a perfect world is I've had some really beautiful people come along my path and be like, hey, same thing. If you stay on this road, listening to the voice of the crowd over the voice of your wife, or the needs of the crowd over the needs of your children, you will be consumed. Mm-hmm. And I remember being like, what do you know? Like, you don't even preach. You don't even carry the load I carry. And I had that same response, but back to God and who he brings, and the whole point of coming together and getting in a room and being human. They had some experiences, again, picking mentor lanes, where they were like, no, I know that he's wrestling with this, because I wrestled with it in a different context. But saying maybe that guy was abusive in a different way than you, but he saw in your eyes himself. And I think that's where God shows up in the church, is when we're willing to be like, oh, like you could help a lot of young men, guaranteed. A lot of young men, you would go, oh, I see you. And I wouldn't see them. And I like do this for a job. Yeah. That's why you coming, let's say, to a church, the benefit is not only are you interacting with your creator, you're also like, we call the Holy Spirit, right? That intuition inside us that says, hey, you know him. And you're like, oh, I know him. And maybe he grew up like way different than you, but you know that you know him. And that is what I think the entire Bible is story after story after story after story of examples that I would read and go, here's what's happening. And you're like, no, Danny, let me tell you. Yeah, you're not seeing, you don't even have to be a theologian. You just know the field. Yeah, right? But you would see the story and you go, oh, I know exactly what's going on.
Mike Ross, theologian.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. But you would be able to read the Bible that way if you understood that, no, these are examples of people like you. Some are very different, but some are exactly like you. And you can watch God move with all of them in the same beautiful way.
When we were at that event, one of the good things that we got from it was a great quote. They said, you're most qualified to help the person you are.
Yes, absolutely.
I thought that was great.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that people underestimate their small comments as they leave rooms to young men like you. Yeah. They think, well, what am I going to do? I don't have a microphone. I'm not on stage. I don't have but that's not church. This is church, right? Like talking about God and scripture and emotional spirituality and all these things. He is present in these conversations, and we're not we're not doing a lot of the stuff people would say, well, it's on their own day, and you didn't take an off day.
We have wine in the fridge.
Yeah, we could do communion. Yeah, right. Yeah. So
We have Ritz Bits crackers.
yeah, and
I'll take some whiskey.
that's a beautiful thing to realize. And then suddenly you're going for a whole different motivation. Like I bet you did the rest of the anger management classes.
Well, I had to.
Yeah.
By law.
So did your attitude change though?
100%. Yeah. That's on. Like I said, that's
He's
where.
never got angry again.
Oh,
Yeah, to be fair, I rarely get angry.
Oh.
Nathan, did we touch feet?
If we did, it was on accident.
wasn't me.
Either way.
I'm not going to interrupt your part.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm lying and not going to hell.
Yeah, not pregnant.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did change. Because honestly, like I don't. It made me just so hyper aware of who I am now, and I think it was to the point where it's like I really change my behavior when I get called out.
Mhm.
Right? If you just kind of like lightly tell me, "Oh, I didn't appreciate that," or "Don't do that," or something like that, I'll be like, "Okay, sorry, I'll watch that again." But until Nathan, unfortunately, has had the brunt of this as with my personal growth, unless it is abundantly clear in somebody. That's how I learned the best.
Mhm.
Like you have to like be like this fucking
Mhm.
it's not cool. Do this or and like then I'm like okay now I'm really listening because before I heard you now like I'm hearing you.
Mhm.
So that was like I said that message just kept playing in my head. I was waiting for them to tell me that. No, like I wanted to tell them like a few more weeks in, like hey by the way I really appreciate you guys. I'm only here because like I'm paying so much attention to who was that guy. And then they're like, oh, he hasn't been here for 5 years. That guy died 7 years ago or something. Yeah, he was just a ghost. I'm like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know, because I never saw the guy ever came back for a certificate or nothing. He just is done. So, yeah, I truly believe that, like you said, everything kind of people come to your place for certain reasons and impacts and words that you say can carry over. And that's why I try to, even at my kids' soccer games, one of the kids do really well. At the end of the game, I'll walk up to the other kids and say, hey, you kicked butt today, you did a great job in goal here, you did this, because I don't know their parents are saying that to them. I don't know anything else. I'm just like, I want you to know that you did good today.
Yeah.
And even that small little impact, my kid sees me doing that, they get some kind of humility from it, but I'm just kind of like, it's just something you do.
Yeah.
Because it's a small impact that could change somebody's day, which is what I carry over now. But yeah, I haven't gotten mad in a long time. Can't remember the last time I really got pissed off.
Like really mad?
Like really pissed off. Like genuinely.
I've seen you get really mad, but more in a defensive role. Like remember the car wash? You know the situation with the car wash? Dude, okay, this is what happens. So Mike's at a car wash. He's in the line. And there's a girl vacuuming her car, something like that.
Yeah, the employee was vacuuming, doing the employee vacuuming the car and stuff. And there's this freaking
Some dude was like taking pictures of her, bent over sort of situation. Mike saw it. I'm on the phone with him. Mike's like, what I do is like, go talk to him. Mike got out of his car, lambasted the dude, like read in the fucking riot act. And like everybody was like super happy because other people saw it too, but nobody took any action.
Yeah.
But Mike has this incredible juxtaposition in his personality where he can be very aggressive and very authoritative and very like you will listen, like you'll pay attention. When he gets a real going, it's a different thing. Combined with a radical empathy, it's a very interesting juxtaposition to me, which creates a real defender from my perspective. And he doesn't know this girl for nothing, but like no idea. Don't ever even talk to her. Honestly, like did you talk to her after that?
Jesus is a thing. Yeah,
It's just a thing because he was making her very uncomfortable, and like I've seen you get really mad in those situations, but I haven't seen you just like fly off the handle.
Last time the only time I can think of me flying out the handle was the old guy who said, "You don't get salary, you get commissions." And
Yeah,
you don't want to say his name, but
what the fuck, dude?
James Bond. That's all I'm
Your
saying.
feet are on my side.
Yeah, because I'm starting to cramp up in these shitty chairs of ours.
They are terrible, dude. These chairs, okay, true story. These chairs, when we first got our office like 3 years ago, were designed to be our break room chairs. Oh, we got busy and never bought conference room chairs.
Yeah, so these chairs.
So these chairs suck. So sorry about your back.
Yeah, send us a bill afterwards.
Slow it on. You did 3 years in the chiropractor just because of us.
Yeah, so that's why. Anyway, so yeah, that was, I never really get bad anymore because the anger management really taught me like how to deal with this. Like nothing's really that. It's never really a bad day. It's just an inconvenience. More often than not. It's like, oh, you cut me off. It's like, okay, now I'm going to be a little late, but it's an inconvenience.
How could you ever be on time?
Yeah. I saw a quote somebody posted in the around the Q thing. They said we need to get rid of all these lights to the order lights, to get on the freeway and stuff because this is ruining traffic. It's all shit. And like, no, because then I don't have an excuse to be late. Let's keep them there.
I got a couple questions for you.
Okay.
What makes you want to quit?
People make me want to quit.
What types of people? Or what situations with people?
People who put expectations on me or others that I see serving or putting time in that they don't have for themselves, probably is probably the most. People who don't do their own work but demand that you should do the work, or worse, because I work within the religious system. People who speak on behalf of God, which is actually where we get that phrase, don't use the Lord's name in vain. It's not like, don't say like in frustration, like, oh, Jesus Christ, that's not what it is. It's saying, hey, Jesus told me to tell you this. And on behalf of God, this is how you should be. God hates you. He hates your lifestyle. I hate that stuff.
I've never heard it. I always thought, don't say the Lord's name in vain. It's like, I'm going to say, God damn it. I've been lied to my whole life.
Which you'll probably get 100 comments people disagree with me, but they're not right. So
Everything's always be wrong.
Yeah, it's just literally using the platform that God's given you to I guess overpower people that you can. And the Bible says that the meek shall inherit the earth, and the whole concept of meekness is not weakness. It's that you have the power to make a change, but you decide not to. Jesus was that. He could have blinked and decided not to die on the cross. He could have blinked and decided not to suffer, but he was so meek that he was willing to set down his power for other people. And so I have a deep activation in my soul when I hear people use the power of Jesus to minimize or marginalize other people. Like people who call out different lifestyles as sin, but they're 250 pounds overweight. And I'm like, well, hold on. Like, I mean, some of us have, one of these is one of the 7 deadly sins. Yeah. Well, I think we have, you have some obvious external stuff, and although all sin is sin, all the sin consequences are not the same. So, I could steal gum and that would be embarrassing. But if I, stole your car, that's gonna be a different. It's still thievery, but they're different consequences. And I think we like as church to categorize back to that grading system. We like to categorize different sins, usually ones I don't wrestle with, right? Right. Those are the ones that, and a lot of people will bum around churches until they find a group of people or a church that leans into the sin, like we're against this. And it's like, yes, I don't wrestle with that. So you're my people. Versus like, no, we're all sinful. We're all on a journey. We're all trying to kind of follow God. And again, the story that he's building with our lives. But we need to be really careful when we use his name in vain to highlight somebody else's stuff when we are not dealing with our own stuff.
Yeah, like Aaron Rodgers. Thinking that it's the coach's fault and it's his fault. He's like, well, if I switch teams, maybe everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be okay. This team sucks because the coach sucks. This team sucks because the coach sucks. This team sucks. No, like, bro, you suck.
Yeah.
Well, he doesn't suck. He just needs to retire now.
Yeah.
But that's the analogy I got.
Yeah. And I deal with a lot of that. It's a majority of my conflict are around people who are like, why aren't you calling out that person or that group? Why are you letting that person be a part? And I'm like, why are you like...
Well, I'd like to speak to that for a second, because I'm a person who those people wouldn't want involved in a lot of ways. I'm not a squeaky clean Christian like I would like to have pretended I was at one point in my life. It's just not the case. The difference is I'm no longer a liar. Maybe I'm not squeaky clean, but at least you're going to get the honest truth every time from the beginning, regardless of how you feel about it, because that's just a commitment I've made in my life.
And the better narrative is you were never squeaky clean.
No, at all. That's what I said. Like, pretended to be.
Yeah. Nobody did.
Yeah. Nobody. It's all just it was a ruse for me, for sure.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big deal. So I think, where was I going with that? I apologize. I lost the train of thought. What was the initial thing I said? Oh, yeah, my issue with that, people don't speak to that. So you and I had a conversation once that I've actually shared with a lot of people, which was really helpful for me. I asked you once, I said, listen, I recognize that who I am today is not, like, I joke that when I was a pastor, a lot of people don't know that I used to be a pastor, but when I was a pastor, I wouldn't let me be involved. Like, if I was still a pastor and I was still being, I met a me, I wouldn't let me be involved back when I was pastoring. And you joked, well, yeah, me either back in the day. And I was like, well, what changed? And you told me something that I've shared with a lot of people. You said, well, I just decided there can't be a finish line until there's a finish line. And we keep expecting people to be at the finish line, and they got 40 more years of life. And you're expecting them to be like at the end, and like the finish line is at death when we go to heaven or hell, whatever happens to you, right? Whatever happens in the afterlife. And you're like, yeah, I just am not going to be that judge of where the line is. Like, I'm just not going to do it. And you're like, the relief that gave me in so many ways, because one of my big frustrations is being, vulnerable on my side of things is like, I've come to these several times, like, dude, like, I just don't feel like I'm a fit. Like, I'm like not. The rest like, okay. Good for you. Enjoy your little few weeks. Big feelings, huh, big guy?
I was more empathetic than that. I've been working on it.
He looked across and he was like, yeah, get that little cheeky grin on his face. And I'm like, oh, stop that shit.
Yeah, I mean,
but like, it's just like, you can't expect people to be at the end till that's the end. And like, everybody's in a part of that process. Everybody's on that journey. Everybody's on their own path. And one of the things I've really appreciated about your leadership style, which has come through so much pain and agony, really, is how this is all developed, is it created a space for people like me to re-engage with something that I've always loved, but didn't feel like I could be a part of again. Yeah. I really appreciate that.
I think, thank you. I think God is the one that designed the church to operate that way. And like all things, money's good, right? It's not bad to be wealthy till you use it to obstruct justice or oppress people. And I think the church is very influential and very heartstring and very, it plays all the right chords, and it's supposed to till somebody grabs it and then creates a song about themselves. It's all supposed to be about him. And I think that's why the system needs to continue to evolve. And I mean, we take these pastors, and if there's any listening or people that deal with these kind of public sort of platforms, and we isolate them and we isolate them and we isolate them, and we think that by isolating them that we're protecting them, but in reality what they need is this. They need to hear from other people. You wrestle with that too. I wrestle with that too. You wrestle with that too. I wrestle with that too.
We talk about that a lot on our podcast, like in other episodes. It's like, hey, listen, like a lot of issues that entrepreneurs have, everybody has, but nobody talks about it.
Right.
Even in the business space, it's not different.
Right.
It's the same thing. We isolate you. Like everybody tells you, that you're crazy. They try to bring you back down to size when you have these big dreams and ambitions and goals. And then the moment you make it, then it's another problem. Oh, he's too good for us. It's the same thing you were talking about earlier. Like, you're not good enough or you're too good.
Yeah.
That attack is no different in the business space.
I agree.
It's the same.
Yeah.
It's really, I've made this comment in our last conversation. I was like, most good pastors are all entrepreneurs. Yeah, they think that way.
I would say so.
That's just how they think. It's no difference. It's building a church, or we like the only reason people become entrepreneurs is because they think they do something better than somebody else.
Yeah, or
that's about it.
Oh, yeah. I think in some ways, I don't know. For me, anyways, if it's better, it's that I wouldn't be fulfilled doing anything but what I'm doing. And I think that...
Yeah, but I don't know. I'm sounding just a little bit. Sure. I don't think that means your specific role.
No, it doesn't mean my role.
I think that's a more unique, because if you aren't doing this, you're not going to come work for us. You're probably going to do something more entrepreneurial.
Like a plumber, like you said.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, you'd be a great plumber. You got the back for it.
The taxi's already, you're good to go, man.
Yeah. You're good. He's going to be a bouncer at a midget bar. Yeah. That's about all he's got. It was like, we're talking about again. No, we're not cutting anything. It's just stream of consciousness. Okay. Couple more questions, and then we'll kind of get some final thoughts here. Okay. In your journey, your timeline, you worked at that church for a while as a support role, youth pastor, and then was it executive? So yeah, and then it's my understanding you went to New Zealand for like a year. Right? Yeah, like this is like your David in a cave.
Yeah,
what happened in that year?
Yeah, I kind of thought like your Aaron Rodgers stuff, that if I left, the church that I was at was really well known in this area. It was 6,000-7,000 people, so I couldn't leave and start a new church without causing all kinds of drama. So I left the country. I saw an American Express commercial. This is a true story, where a guy came downstairs and put his cool leather jacket on and grabbed his keys, and then he grabbed a dart and he went and stood by the door, and there's a big map of the world, and he threw it. And then he walked up and looked, and it was like Uganda. And he was like, that'll do. And he just walked out. And it's American Express, like financial freedom. And I was like, I'm doing that. So I opened up a map of the world, and without knowing anybody, I said, I'm moving to New Zealand. And so I took my family, I sold everything, I quit. I moved to New Zealand. Some people there that were part of the church network that I was associated with heard about me. I was going to plant a church. They said, hey, why don't you take a year and rest with us and do what you do for church, right? Grow things. That's part of my strength. And I got involved with that church. And within 6 months, all my problems stayed with me. All of them.
Yeah, you're like,
everything. Just problems with my marriage, problems with my kids, problems with what I do. Like, I was like, this is crazy.
Oh, man, I feel like we talked about this here for like another hour.
It's crazy. Yeah. And so my wife and I realized that it wasn't, and she had stuff she was dealing with. We realized we weren't changing locations and getting better. So why not go home and do the work? And that's when we jumped into therapy at a level and started this church.
Okay, question, because I've never heard this story.
Mm-hmm.
What were the conversations like between you and your wife about coming back and starting a church?
We didn't think we were going to come back and start a church. We thought we were going to come back and take over the old church that we were a part of, because that guy was going to kind of move on to other things. And so we thought that we could make some healthy changes. And we realized after we were back after about 6-8 months, we couldn't. That's when I literally was very tied up inside, and I told her I was going to go for a drive I think it was a summer day. And I drove like 5 hours east, and she called me and she's like, where are you? And I was like, I think I'm like getting close to Idaho. And she's like, what? And I had one thing, I didn't have any flow. I just followed, and I ended up in Fargo. I drove, is that North Dakota? Is that right? Fargo? I drove for all in 5 days, but the same pair of underwear. It was like a Holy Spirit spiritual.
Did you at least reverse them?
So, no, I'm a purist.
She's like, once we get a good streak on.
Yeah, but I spent that 5 days with God, and on that trip is when I came back, and then I told my wife, I said, I think we're supposed to start a church, and she cried, but she agreed. And so,
okay, let's dive in just real quick. I don't want to take too much time. I want to know this. On that 5-day journey, what were some of your thought processes before you came to that conclusion?
I needed to get all my thoughts out, my debate out. That was my circle in the parking lot time with God. I needed him to know all the ways I shouldn't do this. I needed him to. I needed some of them. I was too prideful. I was too egocentric. I didn't have the education I needed. I didn't have the proper leadership. All I knew how to do was grow things, not mature things. I didn't have the money. I grew up pretty poor. My family never owned a home until like right before my parents got a divorce, and then my mom got it. Like, and I was like 18, 19. Like, we were always dealing with renters and landlord checkups, and so I owned a home at that time, and I was like, I do not want to go backwards. We did actually. We had to sell our house and become renters, and I just was letting him know, if you do this, I may hate you. We just need to know, like, give me a better path. And he said, I can deal with that. Let's go. And so I kicking and screaming, decided I was going to do that. But we started it different. We didn't start it in any network. We didn't take any money from anybody. Our church has never put out a mailer. Like, we started it like, it's like Fight Club. Like, you had to hear from somebody to find us. And I did that on purpose because I didn't want to be owned by the system. That a lot of
was that like an easy, natural decision, or was that something you had to maybe fight with other people who want to start with you? Did they want to do those sorts of things?
Yeah, they would bring ideas. Not the core group knew that we needed to be in faith if we wanted this thing to grow into what it was going to be. Because was it going to be an oak tree in the community, or was it going to be a crop that we're constantly?
Dude, my dad gave me a great phrase. There's a few things my dad said to me that were just really impactful. And one thing my dad said to me, he goes, "Be careful. Only weeds grow overnight."
Mm-hmm. That's profound. Yeah. So we decided to pay a cost, and it has been very costly. But now we're kind of an anomaly in town because we don't belong to anything. Like,
I love that.
Yeah, we're just sort of this weird. And then so we moved around, bounced around. We have a local college here, Clark College. We were the very first church in that college, and its long history in our community, which was a big deal. There's been a church there ever since we were there, and so that was cool. And then we rented a little church for a baptism because Clark wouldn't let us use the pool. And at the inside,
shocking.
And at the end, the guy walked up and asked if we were interested in entering a process to be given the building. And I was like, what? And so God gave us that building. And then a year later, another church enjoyed the way we cared for that older crowd. And they asked us if we'd enter a process with them. And then they gave us that building.
Is that the story of the second campus?
Mhm.
I didn't know that.
They had heard about that church and that. that
I'll tell you what, the building is the only reason I'm there. And the reason why is because I moved near it.
Yeah.
I drove by, I was like, oh, that looks like a place I would probably go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, literally just the aesthetics of it.
You did tell us this before we got on the podcast. I said, how did you choose that church and how did you guys meet? He said, I just walked around and then that looked like a good building to go to.
Yeah, I looked it up online. The picture they had of it online made me almost not want to go. It was terrible.
We'll find it. We'll post it up here.
Here's what it looked like. He looked like
We'll find it.
he looked like a biker who had a push bike without an engine.
Like super soft meat.
Yeah.
Everyone's a soft meat guy.
Yeah, he's like the guy at the biker club who like brings like home baked goods.
Yeah. I will cuddle you in the corner. I will cuddle you so hard. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
That's not I made.
Yeah.
With love.
Yeah. Well, we've evolved that now. It's a little better. It's a little cleaner.
I will find that picture and we'll post it.
Let's hope not. But to be fair, that's the only reason I was there. So that what those people will never know probably is that I should say the only, I think it's someone it probably would have happened. But the only reason I'm participating in your organization is because the building.
Yeah.
That's
That's
it.
how you found it.
I would have never even known to look.
Yeah.
That's how I found it. I was like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I'd probably go there. And I looked it up online and it was like, okay, let's check it out. And honestly, like the first time I ever went, we'll kind of wrap it up on this. The first time I ever went to the church, I actually remember the message, which is strange because I've been in church my whole life. I've forgotten more messages than most people ever hear. That's the way it goes. But the illustration you used was this, actually. This was the illustration. I'll play it for you. It's something that I listen to regularly now. And what it was you were having this conversation and you were using imagery of a piano concert in Cologne. And basically the story goes is that this young girl was the one who was promoting the concert, right? Do you remember the story? Mm-hmm. Do you remember the details? Yeah. Can you share a little bit more? And I'll kind of get into the conclusion, but what was the details of that concert?
Yeah, there was Keith Jarrett was a solo piano jazz artist who was traveling through Germany. And this young woman in her teens thought it'd be really beautiful if he came to Cologne, Germany, and played for them. And he said yes, and he had some stuff he needed, like a piano and other things. And so they sold out.
A piano would be helpful.
They sold out this auditorium. And the night of the concert, the piano they ordered never showed up. And so Keith came in and he said, well, there's no piano. He goes, well, we have this piano. We have a piano tuner here, but it's pretty broken down. And so he went over and he kind of played with the piano and like it was like 13 of the keys were literally broken. Not working at all. And he said, sorry, I can't do it. And so she had the piano tuner tune the rest of the keys. He went out to his car trying to make arrangements for whatever was going to happen next this evening. And the story goes that she came out of the rain and she said, please, you don't understand. You're the only one who can kind of create this space for us. And he saw something.
And it was like sold out too.
Mm-hmm. And so that recording, he came back in and played, he memorized all the broken keys and played what's called the Cologne Concert. And it's the number one selling jazz album of all time. Yeah, this is the opening. This is the actual concert.
I thought you were going to tell me you found the 13 keys in his car.
No. This is incredible. It's just the most beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So this little thing also, he has to call me right now, of course. That's the way things go.
Yeah, he played around all the broken keys, and he played for like, I think, 50 minutes. And
just stream of consciousness, just sitting on the piano, just playing. What I find interesting about it is when you get somebody who's really, really good, and then they have to play under a different set of rules. It creates different pathways in their brain that forces them to think differently and ultimately create new melodies, new rhythms, new everything. And one thing you probably don't know about me is that my dad owned a piano repair shop my whole life. That was his job, was he remanufactured pianos. And so like I'm kind of listening to this, like you listen to headphones, you can literally hear like the pedals are squeaky, like, you know, he's trying to get the dampers to work right. They're not working. You can literally hear it. There's times where he's just like, hammering the fuck out of these keys. And I remember you playing that. And honestly, I'm probably the number one consumer of this album. I've listened to it almost every trip I've taken because when I get anxiety, this is what I play. And the moment I hear that, I have such peace. It's like there's a spiritual thing with this thing. And it's just so peace. It's crazy. But I remember what the point was at the end. You're like, listen, even something broken in the hand of a master can create something beautiful. And that, dude, I'm emotional. And that wrecked me. That wrecked me because brokenness almost became a bit of an identifier for me, like a part of like who I was as a person. Like, oh, you know, this. It's like, oh, no. Listen. You might have some keys that don't work, but that doesn't mean you're not useful. And so for me, that was a real big turning point in my spiritual journey was that message. I was like, all right, I'll come back.
Well,
and now it's been almost 3 years.
That God is the master in your life and my life and all these lives. And all he wants us to do is let him have the time with us to show us the keys that he can create beautiful stories with and beautiful music with. And that is community. That is church. I think that's a well-run business.
Totally. In the context of business, I mean, the truth is the more Mike and I run this business and the bigger the business gets, the more I realize how many areas we're inefficient.
Yeah.
Or like non-existent, you know? And so I just think that sometimes that really limits people because sometimes you can look through and all you can see are the broken keys. And like, well, there's 88. So if there's 13 broken ones, we got 75 that work. Yeah. What are we going to do with the 75 that work? And I think, you know, it's the loaves and fishes. It's like, what are our foods? Well, we got 2 and 5. You know, what are we going to do with it? And I think, you know, for those people who are entrepreneurs, I know this has been a little bit more like an interesting conversation for the podcast, but the principles still work no matter what. I think that's one of the, like you're talking about principles in relationship. Those principles don't really care who you believe in. They're just true. And so if they're true, that means they work. And truth is truth, no matter who says it, which really bothers a lot of people. But it is. There is that standard. I think, you know, to try to be really encouraging for those people who might be starting a business, running a business, considering quitting a business, find the 75 keys that work. You know, submit your life to that. Like, give it, like, dive in, double down. Like Gary Vee always says, he's like, don't work on your weaknesses, double on your strengths. Hire to your weaknesses. Get somebody else in the deck to play the 13 keys that are broken or fix them. Whatever it is. And so I think, you know, that's a real, I think that's a real encouraging feeling for a lot of people to realize that, hey, just because you're broken, just because you messed up, just because you went through bankruptcy, just because you failed some other businesses, just because your marriage didn't work out, or, you know, maybe you have kids who you don't have the same, you know, values that you would want them to have, doesn't make you a failure or unusable or unproductive in any way, shape, or form. It just means that you have this incredible opportunity to think completely different than everybody else around you. And what happened was, like you said, this became the number one selling piano album of all time. It was never supposed to happen, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. So Danny, man, thank you so much for coming today and sharing with us a little bit about you. And it was really cool just to hear your perspective and how things came to be and what makes you a bit different. So thank you very much. Yeah, so no problem. So thank you very much. And now you know a little bit more about the other side. Fade out. What's the sound in? Always the sound in. God.
I know you do that the end out, so I'm just like, God. I mean, it seemed like 10 minutes.
Yeah. Danny, thank you, man.
Yeah, I hope it was helpful.